My dad had always been a man of quiet passions. From the time he was a boy, he loved animals, but there was something about birds that fascinated him most. He would sit in the park for hours, watching flocks take flight, marveling at their freedom and intelligence. Parrots, in particular, captivated him. Their ability to mimic human speech and form connections with people amazed him. For years, he dreamed of having one of his own. But life had other plans. Between work, raising a family, and handling the responsibilities of daily life, he never found the right time to bring a parrot into his world. It wasn't until he turned 50, after retiring from a decades long career, that he finally made his dream a reality. That's when Kevin came into our lives. Kevin was an African grey parrot, intelligent and full of personality. My dad bonded with him instantly. He spent countless hours teaching Kevin words, phrases, and even the meanings behind them. Kevin wasn't just mimicking sounds, he seemed to understand them. He would say hello when someone entered the room, what's up when he wanted attention, and thank you after receiving treats. He even learned to use words like good in the right context. It was incredible to watch. Over time, Kevin became more than a pet to my dad. He was a companion, a confidant, and I'd argue, his best friend. My dad would talk to Kevin as if he were another person, sharing his thoughts, worries, and even his joys. Watching them together, I realized that Kevin brought out a side of my dad I hadn't seen before: light-hearted, playful, and unburdened by the seriousness of life. For 20 years, Kevin and my dad were inseparable. But then, as life does, it threw us a curveball. My dad passed away at 70, leaving a void in our family that felt impossible to fill. Amid the grief, we were faced with a decision: what would happen to Kevin. None of my siblings wanted to take him in. My brother's wife was allergic to birds, and my sister's husband was adamantly against the idea of having a pet that could live for decades. But I couldn't imagine giving Kevin away. He wasn't just a bird, he was a piece of my dad's legacy, a living connection to the man who had loved him so deeply. So I decided to take him into my home. I set up Kevin's cage in the den, a cozy room on the lower level of my house. It was a quiet space where he could settle comfortably without too much commotion. At first, it was an adjustment. Kevin was a lively bird, often chattering early in the morning or squawking for attention. Sometimes when he got too noisy, I'd cover his cage with a blanket, which usually calmed him down. Despite the occasional noise, I grew to love Kevin's presence. In many ways, he reminded me of my dad. The phrases he spoke, the way he bobbed his head when he was excited, even his quiet moments felt like echoes of my father. Over time, he became a part of my daily routine. Every evening, I'd watch TV in the den to keep him company, and when it was time for bed, I'd leave him to sleep in the stillness of the room. 2 years passed like this. Kevin and I developed a rhythm, and I came to understand his moods and behaviors. I knew when he was happy, curious, or just being playful. But one night in December, something happened that shattered our quiet routine. It was around 11 p.m., and I had just gone to bed. I sleep with my bedroom door open since I live alone, and I like to be able to hear what's happening in the house. That night, Kevin's squawking jolted me awake. His cries were loud and urgent, far different from his usual chatter. At first, I thought it was nothing, maybe he was restless or wanted attention, but as the minutes passed, his noises grew more frantic. Uneasy, I got out of bed and went to the den. Kevin was wide awake, perched on the lower rung of his cage, bobbing his head and pacing back and forth. He was repeating phrases like hello and what's up in a sharp, distressed tone. It was clear something was bothering him. I tried to calm him down, offering him food, but he didn't touch it. I draped a blanket over his cage, hoping it would settle him, and went back to the kitchen to get some water. But Kevin's squawking continued. It was relentless. Frustrated, I went back to the den and uncovered him. He was still acting agitated, his movements erratic and his cries insistent. That's when I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the pantry a few feet away. My heart began to race. I stood frozen for a moment, staring at the pantry door. It had a glass panel, and when I flicked on the light, my breath caught in my throat. There, behind the glass, was the outline of a man. Adrenaline surged through me. I didn't think I just acted. I flung the door open and lunged at the intruder, screaming to startle him. He was a middle-aged man, disheveled and reeking of alcohol. He tried to fight back, but I grabbed him, throwing him to the ground with all my strength. We struggled for a few moments, his hands clawing at my face as I held him in a chokehold. Kevin was going berserk in his cage, his cries echoing through the room. Somehow, I managed to overpower the man. I grabbed my phone and called 911, keeping him pinned to the floor until the police arrived. The intruder turned out to be a homeless drifter. He had broken into my house looking for food and had raided my pantry, opening jars of peanut butter and boxes of crackers. He didn't have any weapons, but the thought of what could have happened if I hadn't discovered him sent chills down my spine. That night, as I sat in the den, exhausted and shaken, I looked over at Kevin. He was calm now, perched quietly in his cage, watching me with his intelligent eyes. I realized just how much I owed him. If it weren't for Kevin's warning cries, I might not have discovered the intruder until it was too late. In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Kevin wasn't just a bird, he was my protector, my companion, and in some ways, a part of my dad still watching over me. Kevin saved my life that night, and I'll always believe he was guided by more than just instinct.